Hi everyone. Well, I've been meaning to do this video for quite a while now. I've only just got the get up and go to do it, but breastfeeding and the differences that I've found in between my children, the ones that I've breastfed and the ones that I've not breastfed. Obviously I breastfed the girls. Well, I didn't breastfeed them, I expressed the milk out when they was in skiboo and they were tube fed. So that's what I did with them, but I stopped obviously when I came home. Not because, well, I didn't really know an awful lot about breastfeeding then, and I was on my own, and I didn't really have a lot of support with it. Even if I'd wanted to carry on, I don't think I would have got very far, and it just seemed like the normal thing to do to get some formula in the house and make bottles. It just seemed that's what you did with babies. Obviously that isn't my view now, but back then it was, and that is what, like a good 9 or 10 years ago. Frankie, I breastfed him for about 14 months, and I didn't find it easy at all. When the growth spurts hit with Frankie, they hit, and I'd spend literally all day sometimes feeding. I'd tell myself, oh, this is just a phase, it's just a growth spurt and it'll be over with soon. And just as I started to think I'm never going to be able to get anything done, it would be finished after a couple of days, a few days, and everything was fine until the next growth spurt. Bobby, well, I think I gave up a bit too soon with Bobby. I stopped feeding him when he was about 6 weeks old. I found him really hard work, and when I had the girls and Frankie to run around after as well, I just chose to stop. And in hindsight, I wish that I'd not stopped. Maybe I gave in a bit too easily, but at that time it was the right decision for me. But you know, I made that choice. I made the choice based on him feeding constantly, much worse than Frankie. I just used to have so much milk going on, and he'd never seemed to be satisfied. And when I did actually put him on formula, he was still not settled. He was just as bad as he was when he was on the breast. So I do wish that I just carried on with him, really, because I kind of do see a difference between breastfed and formula fed, but I don't want to annoy anybody or piss anyone off, but I do see a difference. I'll tell you about that later on in the video. But obviously, as you know, I'm still feeding Georgie. He is 11 months old, and he's been fine to feed. He's been brilliant. Even if he's had a growth spurt and I've been feeding him, then I've not noticed it. But then out of all my children, he's been probably the smallest, the one that's gained weight slowest. He's never been like massively overly hungry. He's always fed at good set times, had a good feed, and then gone to sleep, whatever, being awake, not been wittery or anything. And at times I found myself trying to feed him more just to try and fatten him up a bit, but even when I did that, he still gained like a pound a month. It's still what he gains now, and he's eating a lot of food now, and it's still what he gains. It's just the norm for him, like a pound a month. But yeah, the first thing I want to say about breastfeeding is, obviously when I was buying formula for the girls, I used to get milk tokens. So I used to buy their milk from milk tokens because I was a single parent and I didn't work. So I didn't feel the force financially with the girls when I was formula feeding them. With Bobby, however, I spent an absolute fortune. He had an Aptimel, and I must have spent so much money feeding him. Obviously with breastfeeding, it's free. It's not easy, but it's free, and that is another reason why I've continued feeding Georgie for this amount of time, because you know, I've got 5 children as it is, and if I switched in, suddenly thought, oh, I'm going to put him on formula, you know, that would hit our pocket massively, and we already spend enough with 5 children as it is, keeping up with food shopping, bills, the house, everything, clothing them. So yeah, it's free. And also I find it so much easier not having to get up in the night to sort bottles out, going up and down stairs. if Georgie ever wakes up, it's usually about 4ish, and he stays in bed with me till I get up then anyway. Bobby, I used to have to get up in the night. Well, Lee got up in the night, that was his job, and it's more convenient. Everybody says that breastfeeding is better for the immune system than if you was formula feeding. I do agree with that to an extent. Yeah, I do, because I never really had any major issues with the girls. They were always quite healthy. But Bobby used to always be rubbing his ears and having trouble with his ears, and he used to always have coughs and colds, always have a runny nose and snotty constantly. Georgie and Frankie used to get like a runny eye occasionally, and he had a couple of viral infections while he was Georgie's age from being born, and he'd come out in the rash, but never anything major. Georgie, I've never had any problems with him really. He had chicken pox, but he didn't even get that very bad, and he had like a handful of spots on him. I don't know, maybe that's because I breastfed him. I don't know, I was breastfeeding him. But you know, I just find that it does help their immune systems, especially, you know, in the early days more than any time. A lot of people say that breastfeeding makes you have really, really clever, intelligent children. You know, all my children are clever, they're all intelligent, they've all got different things that they're good at. I think what you put into your child, time-wise, and showing them how to do things, and sitting with them and reading and stuff, I think that is what makes a clever child. I think the reason people say, and my health visitor sort of spoke to me about this, we had a talk about it quite a while ago. The reason why people think, the reason why the statistics and everything say a breastfed child is cleverer is based on the fact that formula milk has got a lot more fat in it, which if you feed your child with formula, the fat settles their bellies more and they tend to sleep for longer periods of time. With a breastfed baby, there's not so much fat in it. If you express your milk, you can see the fat on top, and the rest of it is like more watery. So there's not as much fat in it, so your baby doesn't sleep for longer periods of time, therefore he's awake and taking more in of what's going on. Even at a really, really young age, you know, they take things in, they can hear things, and you know, that is the reason why they say that breastfed babies are more intelligent. I know a lot of kids that are breastfed that are really, really clever, and my niece is really, really bright. You know, she's been talking like a 3-year-old since she was a year old, and I'm sure, you know, 20% of that is from breastfeeding maybe, but then the rest of it I'm pretty sure is because she's got brilliant parents that sit with her and, you know, help her come on even more. So I think it's down to the parent, and obviously when babies are awake a little bit more, they do tend to take more in. It's up to everyone individually how they choose to feed their baby. If a friend of mine said, well, I'm going to formula feed, I wouldn't be like, what? You know, what are you doing that for? Breast is best. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to say that to anybody. Everyone's got their own choice of how they want to feed their baby, and at the end of the day, if the parent's happy, the baby's happy. If you're getting stressed all the time because your baby's having a growth spurt, and you feel you need to start giving them a bit of formula at night, whatnot, then that's up to you. If you're happy, your baby's happy. Babies pick up on stress and stuff, don't they? But one thing I will say, if somebody says to me, well, I don't know how many ounces of milk my baby's getting, and I don't, you know, I'm not confident that they're getting enough. When you're breastfeeding, the amount of ounces of milk that your baby's getting is completely irrelevant. All you can go by is how happy your child is. If your baby is like crying because it wants feeding, then you've got to think to yourself, wow, it's a growth spurt. If your baby's like one of these really hungry ones, then please just keep on feeding and feed through it, because it won't last forever, and the phase of a growth spurt will soon be over. If your baby's gaining weight and is content, then you know that your baby's getting enough milk when you're breastfeeding. And you don't really need to worry about ounces. It's hard though when you've got friends that are formula feeding and they're saying, oh, my baby's had so and so many ounces, and you think, how many's yours getting? And you think, hiya darling, and you think to yourself, well, you know, especially if you're a first time mum, sit down, sweetheart. Especially if you're a first time mum, you tend to think, wow, am I doing it right, you know? But if your baby's happy and content, then you really don't need to worry. Obviously, feeding is a really important time for any baby, whether it's formula fed or breastfed. And you know, we're forming bonds and closeness and stuff. I put a bottle in Bobby's mouth and he'd look at me like he loves me so, so much, because he did. It doesn't matter whether it's boob or formula. He loved me so much. But I feed Georgie and I do love the closeness of breastfeeding personally. But to me, breastfeeding is just the normal thing to do now. You know, I'll be absolutely gutted the day I have to stop feeding him. I hope that's not anytime soon. The one difference that I've found between all of my children with breastfeeding, probably the main thing, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it is something that I've seen that is different, is weight gain. Obviously, like I said before, there is a lot more fat in formula milk than there is breast milk, and my girls used to guzzle so many bottles of formula down, as did Bobby, and they have always been quite chunky monkeys. They've always had little rolls. The girls aren't chunky monkeys anymore, but I think they get to a certain age and, you know, it wears off them anyway. They grow up and they grow tall and they grow out. That's just the thing with growth spurts, isn't it? But as babies, there you go. As babies, the girls and Bobby were like little buddies. And I love babies with rolls, completely. But I have seen a difference. Frankie was bigger than Georgie, but he was never huge. He was lean. And I used to say, you can tell that he's breastfed, because personally you can tell that he's breastfed. I didn't mean it in a derogatory way about formula feeding would be a massive chunky baby, but you could tell that Frankie was breastfed. I think as you can with Georgie. Georgie's on the smaller scale. He's just a tiny bit under average now. And yeah, I do think that if he was on formula milk, then he'd be a lot bigger than what he is now. But I guess some families will disagree with me. I guess a lot of you will disagree with me. Some people that have got formula fed babies don't tend to have weight put on. But in my family, with my children, that is the one major thing that I've noticed. So that's it really. I don't think, if I had any more children, I would definitely breastfeed. You know, as I said, I'm not going to knock anyone for formula feeding, but I do think breast is best. It just seems the most normal and the most natural thing to do. And I have friends that have had a fair number of children who have formula fed them, then have decided to breastfeed the next child. And they've really enjoyed it, you know. They've found it hard, but they've really enjoyed it. And I'm sure they feel the same way about it as I do. It's just lovely. It's a lovely experience and it's a lovely thing to do. And yeah, I do feel quite guilty at times that I didn't feed Bobby and the girls like I have Georgie and Frankie. And there is another reason why I choose to breastfeed. A lot of people will say to me, Leanne, how can I lose my weight fast after I've had a baby? And I will honestly say, if you breastfeed, boom, you will lose your weight faster. I found that I lost my weight faster, a lot faster, with breastfeeding. It contracts your uterus down to normal size straight after you've had a baby, a lot faster. Also, when you're breastfeeding, you're burning like 500 calories a day. So you tend to lose weight quicker. Obviously you can allow yourself to eat those treats and stuff that you want to eat because you're burning them off. And I do think it is a brilliant way of getting back to pre-pregnancy weight after you've had a baby. And not to mention the benefit of, it lowers the risk of getting certain forms of cancer. So it is quite beneficial to the parent as well as the baby, you know. It lowers the chance of you getting the baby blues after you've had a baby. I don't know, maybe it's because you're still releasing good hormones from breastfeeding and stuff, and it leaves you feeling happier. I did get really, really down after I had Holly and Emily. I wasn't in a good place at all, and I was on my own a single parent, and I just felt quite depressed. I've not really had that with the rest of my children, not even Bobby. Maybe that's because I knew that I'd given it my best shot. It makes you feel happy breastfeeding. You look down at your baby while he's on your boob and you just think, wow, that is just the most amazing thing. He's still thriving off my milk, off me, just as your baby did when you was in your belly. So I think that does help with postpartum depression. I think, you know, it's horrible if you've ever felt crappy after you've had a baby, and yeah, it definitely does help. For any parent, don't beat yourself up if you can't do it. If you can't do it, if you choose not to because it's not the right thing, then you can't beat yourself up about it. You've just got to do what's right for you and be a happy mum, okay? Thanks for watching, everyone.